In November 1620, a weary band of sojourners arrived to these shores after a tumultuous voyage of 66 days aboard the Mayflower. We know them as the Pilgrims. Although they were very small in number and not very influential in their day, nor well respected, they cast an amazingly powerful and positive shadow on our nation to come. What was the background in which this religious movement was born?
In order to fully understand the Pilgrims and their story, we have to understand the religious controversies that engulfed England at that time. For example, around midnight on November 5th, 1605 in London, England, a justice of the peace named Sir Thomas Knivett was making the rounds in the Parliament building. He caught a fellow in the cellar of the building. That man was Guy Fawkes, who, it turns out, had planted 36 barrels loaded with gunpowder under the building. The next day, November 5th, was to be an opening of proceedings in the House of Lords, attended by a special visit of King James. One of the lords received an anonymous letter encouraging him not to attend that day. By torturing Guy Fawkes, the authorities learned of a plot by a small group of renegade Catholics organized by Robert Catesby. They had rented a cellar that extended under the House of Lords in the Parliament building, and the goal was to blow up Parliament with their 1,800 pounds of gunpowder in those barrels. Thus, they reasoned, they would kill the king and the members of the House of Lords and violently force England to revert to Catholicism. All the men involved in the plot, including Fawkes, were tried and convicted and executed in cruel manners.
Ultimately, I think that the church was not about violence, about violent overthrow. And the use of power to make people change their religious visions or to belong to a certain group, that doesn't last. And that is contrary, totally contrary to the message of Jesus.
Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes, 'twas his intent to blow up the king and Parliament, 70 barrels of powder below to prove old England's overthrow. By God's mercy, he was catched with a dark lantern and a burning match.
To this day in England, each November 5th, to remember this act of sedition, Guy Fawkes is burned in effigy. Even this famous mask is in remembrance of Guy Fawkes. This attempted assassination of King James and the members of the House of Lords would have amazing repercussions for religious non-conformists in England. Not only Catholics, but also Puritans and their spiritual cousins, separatists. Of course, the Puritans and the separatists, as well as the average Catholic, were men and women of peace.
But James I was left really frightened, and so he began a crackdown on everyone who he viewed as a potential enemy, which included all the non-conformists, those who were not conforming to the Church of England. That included the Puritans and the separatists.
The king demanded religious obedience and would persecute dissidents to achieve it. One congregation of Puritan separatists was determined to escape the king's clutches, only so they could worship in peace according to the dictates of conscience. We know them today as the Pilgrims.
Separatists, like the Pilgrims were called at this time in the nation of England, were considered illegal. And the reason was you had the state-supported church. So the civil government sanctions what church you are to attend and where your tithes, which are actually billed to you, so it's not a free choice of tithe, you will support the parish church and you will worship as they say you worship. And so to do this illegally meant you could be arrested. If you continued, you could be put to death. In fact, some of the friends of the Pilgrims were killed in the Tower of London.
Imagine being so persecuted for your faith that to practice it according to your conscience, you could face ostracism, shunning from your family, bankruptcy, even martyrdom. But some of those who played a key role in settling America were willing to pay such a price because of their faith and commitment to Jesus Christ. We should be grateful today for those who went before us and blazed a trail of freedom for conscience sake in America. For Providence Forum, I'm Jerry Newcombe.